leadership of the alliance partners, leadership of the ANC Women's League, the ANC Youth League, the ANC Veterans League, the leadership of MKMVA and SASCO, the leadership of the Military Council, ministers and deputy ministers, metro mayors and leaders of SALGA, and deployed cadres of our movement, and comrades and friends. We have also been really blessed by having former President Thabo Mbeki and former President Kgalema Motlanthe participating in our Lekgotla, and this has been very beneficial to the ANC Lekgotla. This has been a historic Lekgotla, and that is the first time that we hold a Lekgotla through the virtual platform. This Lekgotla took place in the midst of an unprecedented social and economic crisis caused by the global coronavirus pandemic. Our country had to take drastic measures early to slow the spread of the disease and prepare our health system for the inevitable surge in infections. Many believe that had we not done so, the loss of life and consequences for the economy could have been even much worse and more severe. A number of countries continue to experience high numbers of daily infections, and several countries are experiencing an upsurge in infections. After an initial decline and renewed lockdown measures, we must ensure that South Africa, having worked hard to largely avoid a catastrophe, does not experience such a second wave. We reiterate that COVID-19 is still with us. There is currently no vaccine, and we must adhere to the known public health measures that we've been talking about, of maintaining social distance, washing our hands, and wearing masks. And it is pleasing to see that a good number of our people are observing these measures, and they wear their masks, wash their hands, and sanitize them as well. South Africans are called upon to remain vigilant and protect themselves and those around them. Our economy was already in a precarious state prior to this pandemic, with low growth and rising poverty and unemployment. This situation has been made much worse due to the impact of the coronavirus pandemic. We now need to take decisive steps to rebuild and transform our economy. The pandemic also starkly exposed the deep levels of poverty, of hunger and deprivation that continue to exist in our society. Whilst our social and other interventions succeeded in providing emergency relief, the challenge now is to fundamentally restructure our society and economy so that our society becomes more equitable and more just. We emerge from this NEC Lekgotla firmly resolved that the new economic strategy must focus on both recovering from the damage caused by the pandemic and fundamentally and radically restructuring the economy to become more inclusive. It is our commitment as all South Africans to tackle underdevelopment, poverty, unemployment, and inequality, which COVID-19 has so starkly exposed. It is imperative that the strategy that we come up with be accompanied by clear timeframes and monitoring mechanisms that will ensure that there is effective implementation. We've spent the better part of our Lekgotla talking about implementation, implementation, and implementation. Having realized that the many policies, the many plans that we've got need to be underpinned by an urgent need to implement what we are planning. The ANC and government are committed to mobilize society behind the economic reconstruction, growth and transformation plan, the broad framework of which has emerged from interactions at NEDLEC. Such a plan can only be implemented and have the desired outcomes if all sections of society are mobilized to play their role in its implementation and monitoring. Our understanding, and a firm understanding, is that we all as South Africans have a role to play to lift our country out of this hole that COVID-19 has dug us into. Now is the time for active citizenship to make this work. In the second quarter of 2020, our economy recorded a staggering contraction and more than 2 million jobs were lost. During this time, the unemployed fell off the statistical radar as they were not able to search for work and become classified as non-economically active. With this alarming statistic, what this alarming statistic reveals is that there are too many of our fellow citizens who are without work, who cannot provide for their families, and whose energies are lost to the economy. Too many of our compatriots are going hungry, and we need to develop innovative and agile strategies that respond to the real challenges faced by our people. The Lekgotla confirmed that South Africa's recovery and reconstruction plan needs to focus on a few priority areas that will catalyze growth, protect businesses, and create jobs. To both preserve existing jobs and create new ones, the nation needs to build an overarching social compact that focuses on how we live together, how we become a more cohesive society, and how we address our deep structural challenges of unemployment, poverty, and inequality. The NEC Lekgotla reaffirmed that South Africa's reconstruction and recovery plan will be an infrastructure-led strategy with investments in energy, in water and sanitation, public transport, roads and bridges, human settlements, health and education, digital infrastructure, and public transport. The path and speed of economic recovery will depend on many different factors, and the Lekgotla developed criteria and timelines to guide government's actions in the following areas. Firstly, we must strengthen energy security. Secondly, localization through industrialization to enable us to have thriving local businesses and to strengthen our industrial base. Thirdly, we must strengthen food security through agricultural production and the empowerment of emerging Black farmers. Fourthly, Infrastructure investment and delivery must meet the goals that we set out in the National Development Plan. And fifthly, we must support tourism because it is an important job creator. And sixthly, the green economy must be one of the pillars, and we must embark on a number of interventions therein. And seventh, the public employment programs must become a very important pillar to create jobs that our people need so much. The macroeconomic policy interventions must be the bedrock on which we base all our interventions. And gender equality and economic inclusion of women and young people must run through all the interventions that we are going to embark upon. Now, in approaching these 8 key economic focus areas, the ANC supports a phased approach to our economic recovery. Firstly, in dealing with COVID-19, we developed a strategy that had 3 phases. The first phase focused on saving lives and included a massive healthcare response. The second phase focused on saving livelihoods and included support for households and firms. Amongst the measures that we have taken have been fiscal reprioritization to fund temporary increases in social grants, a special grant to relieve those who are in distress, and special payments from the Unemployment Insurance Fund. Now, in the third phase, we're going to implement a program of reconstruction and recovery. The ANC will guide the work of government, working with social partners to generate higher rates of economic growth, investment, and job creation. Our aim is to radically transform our society, as I said, to make it truly non-racial, non-sexist, and economically more inclusive. Our reconstruction and recovery will be infrastructure-led, as I indicated. Key initiatives in this phase will focus on the energy sector, reform, and energy security, and some of these interventions are already underway. Large-scale infrastructure investment in water and sanitation will be rolled out, will focus on rail, ports, roads, and bridges. Human settlements, health and education, and skills development will be part of the package of interventions that we want to implement. The digital infrastructure and public transport will also be the backbone of what needs to be done. This program will be inclusive, as it will focus on local employment and will seek to overcome patterns of economic marginalization as it transforms the structure of our economy. The program will be inclusive, as it will recognize the role that SMEs and cooperatives can play in creating work, particularly for young people and those who are entering into the labor market for the first time across all economic sectors. To achieve significant job creation multipliers, the emphasis will be on localization, including maximizing the use of South African materials and construction companies, as well as labor-intensive methods. And through this, we will be fostering radical economic transformation to enable the majority of our people, enable Black-led companies, to enable women-led companies, youth-led companies to be key players in the recovery process as we move on. South Africa's green and blue economies will be developed in order to stimulate investment growth and job creation. This will include cleaning of our cities and towns in order to harness the potential of recycling, waste management, and the circular economy. This is where we will want South Africa to go back to work, so that we have as many of our people being economically engaged, doing one job or another, moving the country forward. The auction of telecommunication spectrum will be undertaken and is being undertaken urgently, and it should be designed and will be designed in order to ensure that space is created for new black players as well as the big telecoms companies. But as this is rolled out, we will seek to make sure that our people have the benefit of what the spectrum can yield in the form of access, yes, to telecommunications, Wi-Fi, data, and all that. It will be an imperative for sustained reconstruction and recovery that South Africa brings its rising national debt under control and stabilizes public finances. To stabilize public finances, the budget deficit must be reduced. Borrowing costs must be managed, and there must be pro-growth reforms such as large scale off-budget investment in the energy sector and a continuation of pro-investment reforms in a range of productive sectors, including telecoms, mining, agriculture, manufacturing, and tourism. State capacity must be strengthened, among others, to accelerate infrastructure investments and project management skills in a variety of areas of government activity in the public sector to improve project specification and design, but more importantly, to provide good services to our people. Alternative funding models are required, including PPPs and build, operate, and transfer models, the BOT, to mobilize private sector resources and financing for infrastructure should be made more certain and attractive for pension fund trustees. Consideration should also be given to establishing project bonds and green infrastructure bonds to mobilize finance for expanded infrastructure investment. In other words, we will need to package our infrastructure build programs in a way as to be able to attract investors, and we will set up instruments that will enable investors to invest in a much more confident manner. Key to all programs, whether public procurement, land reform, localization, and infrastructure development, must be the deliberate inclusion of women and youth, as well as small, medium enterprises, cooperatives, and the informal sector. Small businesses globally play a critical role in job creation, in diversification, and in bringing more people into the economy. But small businesses are also excellent in generating innovation, new ideas, bringing new products to market, and just unleashing creativity. This is what we want to promote. Cooperatives, in the context of a mixed and inclusive economy, will also contribute towards community, worker, and other sectorial participation in the ownership and management of the economy. Their inclusion and development are a critical part of our economic recovery and reconstruction. The Lekgotla affirmed the role of a capable, ethical, developmental state in implementing the economic reconstruction, growth, and transformation plan. In particular, the ability of the state to plan and to implement in a coherent and integrated manner across the three spheres of government. These plans must find expression at local level through the district development model in both urban and rural areas. The Lekgotla welcomed progress with introducing the district development model to promote seamless integration of national, provincial, and local government as integral to the successful implementation of our economic reconstruction plan. To address backlogs in municipal infrastructure building and maintenance, as well as to support urban and rural renewal, a significant portion of the proposed infrastructure build program should be directed towards municipalities, in addition to own revenue and fiscal transfers. DFI, finance, and private sector investment should also be mobilized to improve rural and urban municipal infrastructure. Rural roads and water services should be upgraded with a bias towards the use of local labor and labor-intensive methods. Attention should also be paid to the revitalization of inner cities and townships, including a model for concessionally funding title holders to upgrade backyard rentals and adding more revenue-generating commercial developments. The developmental state must forge innovative partnerships between the state, labor, business, and other sectors of civil society. The Lekgotla commended progress in the efforts to forge a social compact amongst these partners around the economic reconstruction plan at the NEC level. These broad areas of agreement should also find expression in all economic sectors and levels of society, especially at the local level. The Lekgotla urged government to accelerate the implementation of a single public service. It also emphasized the need for all spheres of government to mobilize and implement e-government systems, including the use of digital systems to create transparent supply chain management processes. On peace and security for economic transformation and human security, the Lekgotla acknowledged that the current levels of crime in our country, the gender-based violence and the corruption are adding a huge and unnecessary cost to the social and economic fabric of our society. In addition, corruption undermines public confidence, displaces local and foreign investment in key sectors of the economy, and causes doubt on critical initiatives of both government and the private sector. We took further note of the social and economic impact of illicit financial flows, anti-competitive behavior, protection rackets, racketeering and destruction of public infrastructure. Part of the social compact must ensure that as a society, we take a firm stand against these kinds of practices and that their impact on consumers and businesses and communities and the economy should not continue in the negative way that it is now. The work that is being done by law enforcement agencies at the moment is commendable, and we reaffirm that we must leave no stone unturned in dealing with crime and corruption. The ANC commits to an approach that balances the need for the detection of the movement of bribes, the use of the financial systems to launder illicit money flows, and the human rights need to allow for honest living, including engaging in business activities where a citizen has ceased to be entrusted with a prominent public function. In this regard, the Lekgotla reaffirmed the position of the ANC and the government that employees of the state should not conduct business with government. At the same time, further consultations will be held amongst the alliance partners and in the legislatures across the political spectrum to find the most appropriate approach to the issue of other politically exposed persons conducting business with the state. On the issue of gender equality and a non-sexist society that we seek to build, the Lekgotla reaffirmed the ANC's commitment to a non-sexist South Africa, and as part of a progressive global humanity, to achieve generation equality in our lifetime. The Lekgotla agreed on the following priority actions towards the achievement of the goal of gender equality. Firstly, the mainstreaming gender in all national, provincial, district, and local programs, and educating all sectors of society on the approach to gender mainstreaming, including gender budgeting and reporting. Secondly, gender justice and the economic and financial inclusion of women as key to the ERRP, including such mechanisms as the 40% set aside for women in public procurement, legal remedies to close the gender pay gap, women's participation in key economic sectors, access to assets such as land, and women's financial inclusion and empowerment as well. Also highlight South Africa's role, along with Mexico, as a global champion of the South for the achievement of generation equality. Mobilization and support for SMMEs, also cooperatives and the informal sector businesses at local levels, and a key part of the district development model. The pandemic of gender-based violence requires a multifaceted approach as set out in the National Strategic Plan on Gender-Based Violence and Femicide, which must become a critical tool in the struggle against patriarchy and sexism. We emphasize that we must deal with gender-based violence and femicide as a societal problem and involve stakeholders beyond the criminal justice system. The ANC campaign to involve men and boys in the fight against gender-based violence and femicide must be broadened to involve as many partners as possible. The challenge we now face in the immediate and medium term can only be addressed if we all work together, hence the need to build a national social compact. Those countries that have led themselves out of economic malaise and lack of growth have been those countries that have built strong social compacts. In our case, we believe that the social compact must involve social partners through the NEC structure or institution. Specifically, we must also engage women and youth in national dialogues, and we must also decentralize our engagements to sectoral, district, and community levels so that we can build compacts at that level as well across the country. To drive the process of social compacting and mobilization, we need an ANC that is united, that is focused on the tasks at hand, and with a strong active presence at community levels and all sectors of society. Strengthening and renewing the ANC therefore remains an absolute priority and a precondition for the deployment of capable cadres as public representatives and in the state. The ANC commits to ensuring effective gender mainstreaming in all aspects of the economic reconstruction and recovery plan through the participation and mobilization of women at all levels. We must all work together to build social cohesion at community level, supporting families, children, the elderly, and people living with disabilities, young people, as well as other groups facing discrimination in our society. And if we can do this, our recovery efforts that are going to be encompassed in the plan that will soon be announced will indeed take us much further. Our country is ready for recovery, and it now behoves on us as social partners to join hands and make sure that the recovery that our country deserves does indeed happen. And lastly, all this will happen if we focus our attention on implementation, implementation, and implementation. That is now going to be the order of doing things so that we can meet the needs of our people. I thank you.
Yeah, thank you, President. That is the end of our Lekgotla. Drive safe, go home, don't drink and drive. Thank you very much.